Good evening. I'm Melanie Risden with the Western Standard. Joining me tonight are some families that are either Canadian citizens based in Canada, they're Canadian citizens based in the US, but we're basically going to be talking with families who have been experiencing a lot of frustration and grief with the lingering vaccine mandates when it comes to travel between the US and Canada in the US. These families have family members that are either, across the border, and they haven't been able to see them for months, if not years. We even have some families who have lost family members and were unable to come and see their parent or attend the funeral. So we're going to chat with these families tonight, just to get an idea of how this has been impacting a lot of families between Canada and the United States. First of all, we're going to speak with Marcella Picone. She's out of Buffalo, New York, and Marcella was the one that originally contacted me, and we started discussing the situation that she's facing. Marcella has a fiance that is a Canadian citizen, and he lives in Stony Creek, Ontario. Now, Marcella was originally part of a Facebook group called Families Are Essential, but then started her own Facebook page called For the Love of Family. Marcella, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me to allow us to share our stories today. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your situation with your fiance and how this all sort of got started with the Facebook groups and just looking to support other families?
Yeah, so my fiance is Canadian. He's a permanent resident Canadian. We've been together for 6 or 7 years. We have 2 kids together, a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. And obviously, prior to COVID, we were allowed the luxury of being able to cross back and forth. We actually are about 45 minutes away from each other. So it was always a quick drive. So then obviously when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, both of us wanted to stay in our own countries. We obviously wanted each other's healthcare system. We're not married. So obviously my passport allowed 6 months to be in Canada. And obviously he has the 6 months to be able to come in and out of Canada as well. So we just are a family that went back and forth from 2 households that happened to be in 2 countries. So when the pandemic hit and there was the chatter of shutting down the bridge the week of March 14th, nobody ever thought that it was going to be 2 years in. I think we were all led to believe 14 days to flatten the curve. So again, we didn't think anything of it. And again, every 30 days, there was just a continued extension. And now we're on, 2 years. So I would say a year into the border closure, there was a Facebook group that was started for them. Families Are Essential. The original goal on that was to try to get families deemed essential because both sides of the border had categories of who could or couldn't cross the border. The potato chip truck driver was able to cross. The Pepsi guy was able to cross. Healthcare workers were able to cross. So we wanted to start advocating to expand the categories of who can cross the border. So Families Are Essential was created with 2 admins, Michelle and Sandy, and their objective was to protest the various bridges throughout the country. Sandy is in Fort Erie. She has family in the US and Canada. So she started every Sunday at 1:00. She had American families on one side of the bridge and Canadian families on the other side of the bridge. So through the power of social media, there was a couple other Facebook groups that also popped up that were advocating to get the border open to exemption. So we met, and for 9 months straight, every Sunday at 1:00, we were at the bottom of the Peace Bridge. The Americans were at Patsole Park and the Canadians were at Martha Park. And, we got the attention of the media. We got the attention of our congressman. Actually, Congressman Chris Jacobs introduced legislation last year with the advocacy work that we were doing. And obviously, there was a lot of trending going on in the summer of 2021 that the border was going to open, vaccine, not vaccine, testing or not. And people started advocating only the vaccinated, open the border. So I recognized in the beginning that if the border was really going to open up to only fully vaccinated, there was going to be thousands of families that still needed to advocate for a pathway. So sometime in the middle of that, I started another Facebook group called For the Love of Family Reunification for All, because I just knew that when the border was opening up to fully vaccinated, either Americans or Canadians, that the advocacy work was going to sort of stop. One of the things is Canada always allowed exemptions for family reunification. It actually started in June of 2020. So if you had an immediate or an extended family in Canada, as long as you were able to meet the cumbersome requirements of quarantining, you were able to enter Canada. And my family will forever be grateful for the family reunification exemptions that the Canadian government did allow for foreign nationals, because I did have the luxury and the privilege of being able to quarantine for 14 days. I had a remote position. I was working from home. So for me to cross the land border, to isolate with two little ones, in the privacy of my own home, so that I could reunite with my fiance during that pandemic was a miracle for me. So I always advocated, and my voice was always for other people that, didn't work from home. They can't take 2 weeks off. Like, you need to understand, binational families and bordering towns, we're 10 minutes away from each other. We're closer to Canada than we might be to a bordering state of Pennsylvania and Ohio. So that's what led me to, continuing to keep advocating for everybody to get back to this pre-pandemic way of life, get back to what we knew, and, the luxury and the freedom that we all had as American citizens and Canadian citizens to cross each other's border. You have people that come into the US to just pick up gas, go to the grocery store, go to our malls. And again, it's quicker to pop into the US than it is to maybe go to the supermarket down the street in Canada. So when the pandemic hit and when the borders were shut down, families were forced to be separated with no pathway. I mentioned that Canada did these exemptions in June of 2020 and October of 2020 for immediate and extended families. But unfortunately, the US had no exemptions by land. The land border has been closed to the unvaccinated over 18 months now. Again, we're going on 2.5 years. The US always deemed a Canadian family trying to reunite as non-essential. So again, they have not been able to cross by land in their own individual car. Something that was also odd was an unvaccinated Canadian for 18 months was able to fly into the US. So if you were afforded the luxury of being able to afford a plane ride, you were able to do that. Sorry about that. You were able to pay, you're able to pay your flight, and you, instead of driving 10 minutes over the border, you had to drive an hour to Toronto, take 2 flights, spend an hour and a half from Toronto to Detroit, Detroit to Buffalo. So the science never made sense. The US was always saying an unvaccinated Canadian was safe to fly into the US, but they were never able to drive. And, fast forward, we're now 2.5 years in. There's over 44 countries that have dropped all COVID mandates. Norway, Iceland, Ireland, United Kingdom, Aruba, Costa Rica, Sweden, Poland, Denmark, Argentina, and the US and Canada are not on that list. There's still restrictions with either being fully vaccinated, having a pre-arrival test, or downloading an app to get into Canada. This is not where we are. The science never said that families should be separated. So I continue this advocacy, and I have met thousands of families that have struggled with not seeing each other for 2+ years. And until the border on both sides gets back to where we were, I will continue to keep fighting Congress, members of Parliament, the president, anybody that's willing to listen.
Well, and I think a lot of people had high hopes that April 1st, when the U.S. border or the U.S. restrictions at the land borders, so specifically for driving at land borders, were set to expire. But of course, very quickly it was extended, and there is no date mentioned as to sort of an end date for that extension. And not to mention that, there's also been talk within the federal budget that they have sort of put aside enough money to sort of further these travel restriction mandates within the Canadian border for the next 3 years. So moving until 2020. So very tough. Very tough for a lot of families to hear both of those stories.
So you bring up a really good point. There is a lot of high hope. I have hope that the U.S. cannot continue this COVID theater. The COVID mandates need to get dropped. There is chatter of what's happening at the southern border with rescinding Title 42, and that allows asylum seekers to enter the asylum border. And there's talk that there's no longer this public health crisis to maintain Title 42. So as an American citizen, where you have my government advocating for these open borders down south, I'm advocating and I'm screaming to the Biden administration to have the same sympathy for me as the American citizen to allow an unvaccinated father, mother, grandparent, sister to reunite. So if there is no public health crisis on the southern border because that Article 42 is dropping, Title 19 should also get dropped because we all know that we can reunite safely. We all know that there's vaccines and therapeutics and there's all these strategies in place. We know that we're not going to get to a COVID zero. So, 2 years in, I think continuing to punish families that choose to be unvaccinated is no longer, the free society that Americans or Canadians believed that we were a part of.
Right.
So yes, in my heartest of my hearts, I believe that the U.S. is going to join that list of 44 other countries that no longer have COVID mandates. Unfortunately, it's only going to be a matter of time. Politics is playing a major role on why these mandates are still in place.
Yeah, and I think it might be a bigger uphill battle for Canadians to have that expectation here, for sure. Marcella, thank you for connecting me with these next families. One quick question for you, Marcella, and this is, considering that there are going to be viewers who are thinking to themselves, well, we'll just get vaccinated and this all goes away. What are your thoughts around that perception from some people that, you're struggling to reunite with family? Why don't you just get vaccinated?
Families have sacrificed for the last 2 years to not reunite. They have made a decision to not get vaccinated. And 2 years in, they're not going to make that decision so that they can actually reunite. The government should not be forcing a medical decision on families to choose on reuniting with your family. So again, I think families are going to continue to stand their ground, stand on the foundation of freedom and medical choice and allow that the government is going to do the right thing by both American and Canadian citizens. I could hold my government accountable that the amount of energy we put into being a free democratic society, we are not free until the U.S. absolutely has open borders and everybody, regardless of medical vaccination status, could enter the U.S.
Marcella, thanks for joining us. Marcella is the creator of For the Love of Family Facebook page, and it looks like you've got your hands full there with a couple of little ones. So we'll let you go, and thank you again for connecting us with these families through your Facebook group and through your advocacy and your support. Continued support for families who are struggling to reunite with these lingering mandates. Thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you very much. I've met some wonderful families. We all have some heartache of stories. So hopefully your viewers understand what we're going through and why we continue to keep making that decision on why families choose to not be vaccinated.
Right. Thanks,
Thank you so
Marcella.
much.
Okay. And so we are going to speak with a few other families now, just to hear some stories about how these travel restrictions, these border restrictions between Canada and the US have been affecting them and impacting their ability to see loved ones. We'll talk with Tanya first. We've got Tanya Mead. She is out of North Vancouver, BC. And Tanya has a couple of kids that attend school in the US. Thanks for joining us, Tanya.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so why don't you fill us in on the situation with your kids that are attending school in the U.S.?
So I have two kids who are in opposite cities, so they're apart, they're not together. They are in the same state. One is a Canadian citizen, she's on an F1 visa, and one is a dual citizen. Uh, I've not seen, our Canadian daughter has not been back to Canada since December of 2020. So she has not seen her dad. She has not seen her two younger siblings since Christmas of 2020. Last summer, I was able to fly into the United States with my son to check him into his dorm for freshman year. And I have not seen either of them since. They've spent Christmas alone in campus housing. They had to go buy their own little Christmas tree. They had no Christmas dinner. They have no family there. We don't know anyone there at all. No family, no friends. It's just the two of them. Thankfully, they were able to get together for Christmas. We've had other instances where my son has needed a visit to the ER, and I've had to facilitate his treatment with the doctors through a Zoom call from my house because I can't get on a plane and fly to him. As a mother, it's heartbreaking to see your child who needs you and you just can't get to them.
I can't imagine. That's going to be very hard, Tanya.
Yes.
How old are your kids?
So my son is 19 and my daughter is 22.
Okay. And it's your daughter that you said has not been able to come up since, I think you said it was December of 2020?
Correct. And now with these new rules, she was, she's scared to come back because of all of the continuous changes. And if she comes back to Canada now, she would be inadmissible back into the United States to finish her studies because she is unvaccinated. She's chosen that for herself. She's made that informed consent, to not be vaccinated. She's gotten that herself. And she wants to finish her degree. And in order to finish her degree, she has to stay in the United States. She can't come home. And she's called several times crying, and she misses her family, and she wants to see her siblings, and she can't because of these travel mandates. And
how old are her siblings?
They're both 17. They're twins, a boy and a girl. And she's COVID recovered. She's had COVID. She recovered. She's fine. To me, that has to count for something, to have that natural immunity.
So do you guys FaceTime a lot? Is there, is that sort of what you rely on to feel connected, help her stay feeling connected?
Yes, we text multiple times a day. We're a very close family. And before all this happened, we've never spent a Christmas apart, a birthday apart, a Thanksgiving apart. We were together all the time and extremely close. So yeah, we FaceTime very often. If not every day, then every other day. But we definitely text all day I get texts sometimes the time difference. So, she may text me at 5 a.m., but my phone is always by my bed. So they know I'm there if they need me, and I'm going to answer that phone. I don't care what time it is.
Yeah, I can't imagine having a child, no matter what age. I mean, we're always a parent, no matter how old our kids become. And not being able to see them or be there for them, especially in a situation where they are needing medical treatment or care. That must have been very hard. Tanya, your two kids, where they are residing or the state that they're in, have they also been struggling with their schools when it comes to the mandates, or was the vaccine mandates never applied at either of their schools?
So one of the schools in 2020 and 2021, they had, my daughter's an athlete, so they had regular testing. And they had masks in the classroom, but this past school year, since August of 2021, they've had nothing. There's no vaccine mandates. There are no masks. life is completely back to normal. They're going to concerts, they're going to sporting events. You don't need anything. It's pre-pandemic. There's no testing in the schools anymore. And I'm happy that they have that, because I can't imagine, being separated from your family and then not being able to do anything, to be in lockdown, the way we've had it in Canada. We're here in BC. We just recently had the vaccine mandates lifted.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that. I mean, that's a really stark contrast to
Yes.
BC. I think BC was the last Canadian province to lift the mandates. So that's very new for you.
Very, very new. And it's been so long since we've been able to get it and do that stuff. So if my kids were in the US living like that, I think it would have been much, even more difficult than it already has been. There's so many kids struggling in these states where they are in lockdown and they are still having to wear masks, or vaccines are mandated. It's really tough on these young kids. You get out of high school and you go straight into college, and it's supposed to be the 4 best years of your life, they say, and you're locked down and you can't go do the things that you want to do. It's mentally, and then to be separated from your family, it just adds that extra layer.
Absolutely. And your husband, I'm assuming this has been just as taxing on him, not being able to see his kids.
Yeah, of course. And your girls are your daddy's girls, and my daughter has called and she's cried and she was like, I just really would love a hug from my dad. And what is he supposed to do?
Yeah.
So he can't hug her. He can FaceTime her and call her and talk to her. And our kids they're just fabulous kids, and they call us for everything. They're, if they're feeling sad, they'll call and say, I'm feeling sad. I just want to talk to you or whatever. So it's difficult.
Tanya, when are your kids' programs wrapped up? When is the potential return for them if these mandates don't go away?
My daughter will graduate from her program May of 2023.
Okay.
My son's a freshman.
So he's still got a long road. But she's about a year away from potentially returning. And then, Tanya, have you and your husband, your family, how have you been advocating? How have you been trying to stand against these mandates?
I have written to every single MP in Canada, every one of them.
And have you heard back?
I heard back from one, Jonathan Wilkinson, who's our MP here, who basically told me if I chose not to get vaccinated, then I would have to deal with the restrictions. There was nothing you could do because the majority of Canadians agreed with these mandates and these restrictions.
I think that there has been definitely some statistics that would say otherwise. I think a majority of Canadians have chosen to be vaccinated, but I don't believe that we're looking at a majority of Canadians at this point who agree with these mandates staying in place.
No, I'm sorry. I have lots of friends. I have lots of friends who are fully vaccinated and boosted, who now are changing their tune and saying, it's time for these mandates to stop. If we're vaccinated and we're safe and the majority of Canadians are vaccinated, then it should be fine to lift all these mandates and just let everyone travel. So people are waking up. People are seeing that this is more based on a political theme than it is on a health theme right now.
Well, and agreed. And I think the problem is with the awareness piece is if somebody has chosen to be vaccinated and is not restricted anymore, then they're not perhaps even paying attention as much to the fact that I believe it's somewhere around 6 million Canadians are landlocked in the country, cannot cross the border, cannot leave, cannot fly. So that's a startling amount of people that are still sort of under this mandate. Tanya, I'm going to ask all of you the same question, and again, this is just to help people understand. if the solution is to get vaccinated, why are you and your family and your children choosing choosing this choice and remaining sort of restricted from travel?
I don't agree with anybody telling me what I need to put into my body. And I have done a lot of research on these vaccines from the companies, from Pfizer, from Moderna, from the J&J, AstraZeneca. I've downloaded thousands of pages and read it. And I just don't feel it's something safe to put into my body. I have friends and family members who have gotten this vaccine who have had really bad side effects. I have one friend who in the US who now has lupus, and the doctor confirmed it was from the vaccine, and high blood pressure. And this person is going to be on medication for the rest of their lives. And that's just from the first dose. I know people who've had stroke symptoms. Is just there's not enough evidence to prove to me that the benefits outweigh the risks of these vaccines.
Well, thanks for that, Tanya, and thanks for sharing your story with us. And part of the reason why I am asking this question is I think that there are a lot of people. I've even had conversations with some who believe that certain people or people who are choosing to remain unvaccinated are doing so because they're not educated, because they haven't looked at the science, because they are, vaccine hesitant and haven't educated themselves. So I think this is a good question to ask at this point. Let's talk to Justin. Justin Reining is a Canadian with parents who live in the United States, and Justin is from Fort McMurray, Alberta. Thanks for joining us, Justin. Why don't you fill us in on what your scenario is and how these mandates have affected your family?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So yeah, I live up in Canada here. My mom and my stepdad live in Washington State, so south of the border. Anyways, so long story short, we used to always go. I'd visit them in Mexico. That's where we usually would meet. So our last trip, which was right before all this started, was in February 2020. We got back just before everything started, and I have not seen them since then. It's very, very frustrating. The biggest problem we had was my mom is dual citizen, so she can get across the border if she wanted to. She could have to quarantine and all that. However, my stepdad wasn't able to. He was an American citizen. So neither of them could get across. They're not vaccinated, right? And of course, I can't go over. Long story short, we dealt with this for 2 years. And then they went to Mexico just in January, February of this year. And when they came back, they both got COVID. My mom, she worked through hers. She was a little healthier. And then my stepdad, he does have some underlying conditions. He's 80. And it wasn't too bad. He was having some ups and downs, and then just wasn't getting enough oxygen. So they decided finally, okay, they need to get him into the hospital. And just to add to the whole restrictions thing, my mom was not able to see him in the hospital physically for 20 days straight. And luckily, the last day he was alive was the 20th day. She was able to go in and see him and, be with him when he passed away. It really tore me up, right? Sorry.
Of course.
But and then of course I can't see her, so I'm calling her on the phone, and Zoom call or whatever we can do. I can't go down there, help her out, be with her, anything like that. Luckily, she has some very good friends there that have been helping her, and then my uncle was able to go down and be with her for a couple weeks here. So it's there's all this stuff. We have a wedding to plan. I was hoping to have them both up here to do it. They can't come up for that. Obviously now it's just my mom. But I can't do that until I know she can be here for it. And it's just absolutely frustrating that they have this. I mean, you're locked in your own country, which is absolutely ridiculous in a country like Canada or the US. It doesn't matter, right? And the US border restrictions are even worse. I did call the border guys to see, and they have one exemption, which is if you need a medical procedure, you can't get anywhere else that you can get there. That's the only thing they have, right? You know, I told them, I said, hey, my stepdad just passed away. Yeah, sorry. Too bad. Right? Like, yeah. So it's ridiculous that they still have all these, you know, I can't fly, I can't take a bus, I can't do anything in Canada basically unless I drive somewhere. And I just touch on a point you'd made earlier, just in the last chat you're having there. There's a lot of people that don't understand that these restrictions are still there. I work with someone who we were just having a conversation, right? And he said, oh yeah, you know, I was going to have to wear a mask on the plane. I didn't think we had to anymore. And I said, yes. I said, you still have to do this. I said, this is why I can't even fly. And he's like, what do you mean you can't fly? I said, I can't fly in Canada, right? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it you know, and I know that there are some lawsuits that are challenging this. I mean, you know, it is something that goes against our constitutional right of, you know, mobility and freedom of movement and to, you know, come in and out of the country. So there are legal challenges. Have you been following along with any of those? Are you aware of them? What are your yeah.
I haven't followed a ton of them, but I know they're out there, right? That people are challenging it. It's not something I've done, of course, but yeah, I mean, we watch as much of this as we can, and you know, I have a lot of conversations with people too, and you know, like you said, the people that are vaccinated, they just sort of moved on with their life, and they've forgotten that there is this massive amount of people that cannot move, and you know, as far as I'm concerned, is completely against your freedom in, you know, one of the freest countries supposedly in the world, which we are far from right now.
Yeah, I think it has surprised a lot of people, a lot of Canadians, but I think a lot of people worldwide as well. A lot of the coverage we've watched, especially with our prime minister heading to Europe for, you know, conferences and meetings and whatnot, and having such, you know, even just protests against him in other countries, even officials from other countries, sort of belittling his you know, decisions around keeping these mandates and restricting the rights of Canadians. It's you know, it almost, I've heard from many people that it just feels like a complete, like another world. We're living in a completely different reality than what we knew.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you could, you know, if you could prove that the vaccines are actually stopping transmission and that, you know, people can't get sick, you know, when you go get a smallpox or TB or any of those ones, polio, when you get those vaccines, you don't have any worry of getting sick. So explain to me why all the people I know that are close to me that I know well enough, every one of them that's had COVID pretty much has been vaccinated at least once or twice or 3 times, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that that's what we're seeing too when you're looking at the science these days. People are contracting COVID left, right, and center, vaccinated or unvaccinated. It seems to actually be, you know, kind of nonsensical now. The vaccine has proven that it is not preventing the transmission. Perhaps there is still protection offered from severe outcomes, but the transmission side of things, I think, has been easily shown by the data of who's being hospitalized and who is contracting it at this point. So, you know what, Justin, how is your mom doing? I mean, she's now kind of alone down there, is she not?
Yeah, pretty much. She's it's just her. I mean, luckily she does have some very good friends down there, which are like family to her. So which helps. They've been really, really good through all this. But yeah, I mean, she's alone, and you know, we used to be able to see each other at least twice, 3 times a year. She'd come up to Calgary and visit me, and then I would go down, usually either down there or I'd go to Mexico as well in the winter, and we'd meet up there. But now I you know, I haven't seen her. It's, you know, she's trying to figure out what she wants to do. You know, right now I'm not moving out of the States, right? She has her dual. She could, you know, she talked about, you know, if she ever did move, if something happened or whatever, that she might move back to Canada, possibly. But now she's like, no, she's like, you'd be crazy to. She's like, I'll stay down here. She's like, you never know. You might need somewhere to go.
Yeah.
Canada's going nuts as far as I'm concerned. I'm very, very concerned for this country with the way
It's been a struggle for many, for sure.
Yeah.
Justin, I'm going to get you to hold on there for just a sec. We're going to jump into, hopefully we can still, it looks like a couple of our guests might have to jump off fairly quickly here. So thanks for sharing, Justin. And I'm sorry that this is the experience for you right now, but hold on. I'm going to come back to you in just a moment.
Sure.
Chris Patty, Chris Patty, are you available to still chat with us for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Now, Chris, you're a Canadian citizen. You're living in the U.S. You're in Pensacola, Florida. And can you tell me a little bit about your situation, your circumstance with your family?
Yeah. So in 2020, my dad got diagnosed with terminal cancer. He had prostate cancer that was under control, and because of some of the COVID restrictions, they deemed his cancer treatment non-essential. So they pushed off his cancer treatment for a month, and in that time, it metastasized, and he was told he had a year, roughly 1 to 2 years to live. So at that point, that was June of 2020, and at the time I was engaged. My dad is a dual citizen. My mom's Canadian. I'm a dual citizen. And so they wanted to go with me down to Mexico. So they were able to drive into the U.S. at the time. Went to see my fiance in Mexico. That was something I'll cherish for the rest of my life. But then in June of 2021, my father's doctor in Edmonton at the time said, you know, he's not doing very good. You should try and get up here. At the time, I was fully vaccinated. I got vaccinated on the 15th, second dose on the 15th of May. I tried to ask for compassionate grounds to not have quarantine requirements. They wouldn't get back to me. I was on the phone with the Canadian Embassy. They told me I needed to talk to the COVID hotline. The COVID hotline said it's not us, it's Health Canada. Health Canada said it's the COVID hotline, and that really got me nowhere. And then the day my father passed, I got a call and said, hey, can you get here now? I tried everything I could. I was willing to spend my life savings to charter a plane to get there to be with him. And they said, it doesn't matter. We don't care. You're fully vaccinated. We don't care about any of that. You can't fly to Edmonton. You'd have to fly to Calgary. And then at the time, there was hotel quarantine restrictions, and I would have had to breach those and risk $1 million fine to decide whether to go see my dad before he died. And I'm so blessed that we got the time down in Florida where there weren't any restrictions, and we were able to go to the zoo. We were able to go to restaurants. We were able to have some memories that if I were in Canada, we wouldn't have had any of those opportunities.
Right. It feels like through this, so much has been taken from people and families.
Yeah. And it's like, I would say I was always so proud to be Canadian. I was a Blue Jay fan, an Oiler fan, a Raptor fan. I was always, everywhere I went, I'm Canadian. I love it. And I hope to go back there someday. And then after all this and all that was taken away, I almost feel ashamed for the country that I grew up in. Like it's so disheartening because I even got vaccinated against what I really thought was a good idea, because at the time it was not full FDA approved. I was taking a risk. I didn't know how it would affect my health. And I got it just so I could go back. And they said, well, we don't even care because of the bureaucracy. We're not going to let you in, even though you're a Canadian citizen. And that really was the last straw. And I tried calling the the Prime Minister's office. I called 200 times and they just kept trying to send me to voicemail, and then they threatened that, oh, you're harassing us. I'm like, well, I want to talk to somebody. It doesn't need to be the Prime Minister's office. It can be somebody from the government. And finally, somebody transferred me to the COVID line, which is when I got that runaround. So just so disappointing that Canada is supposedly, we supposed to care about our people. We supposed to, we have a public health system that is supposed to, keep people from financial ruin and things if heaven forbid they get sick. And yet we're willing to throw all that away and destroy families because we're worried about COVID at the time. And it really was disheartening.
Well, Chris, I can understand. I can completely understand. I too lost my fat father during the pandemic, and I just thinking about how desperate you must have felt to want to be there with the rest of your family, want to see him. It breaks my heart knowing how much that would have, how hard that would have been for me. So I truly am sorry that was something that you had to go through with your family. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, just one last thing. The one thing that, people always said, well, you can FaceTime, you can do all this stuff, but FaceTiming a loved one while they're dying and FaceTiming a funeral is not acceptable from what happened to me. It really broke me for a long time. And
I'm sure.
Yeah. So people out there just think that's okay, but to me it wasn't okay. It wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Chris, the line for me is at what point is the responsibility, greater than compassionate love, care, being able to be together with family, especially in times of need, illness, death, things like that. It just, it seems very heartless.
Yeah.
Chris, hold on. I am going to come back to you in just a moment. We're going to...
I have to get off, so I appreciate
it. That's right. You do have to run. Okay, yeah, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, very, very sorry for your loss.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye. We have Alicia. Alicia is joining us. Alicia Merrihew, she's a Canadian also living in the United States. I know, Alicia, you also have to run. So hopefully you have a few minutes here just to let us know. You're in Grand Rapids, Michigan right now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how this has affected your family, what your circumstances were?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My story kind of echoes everyone else's. I live 2.5 hours from Detroit, 3 hours from my family, and we got together all the time. I would probably see my family at least once a month. We did ever since I've moved here, since 1993. I've never missed a Christmas until 2019. We did camping trips together, Canadian Thanksgiving, birthdays. And then with the border shut down, nothing. So we went from seeing each other all the time to absolutely nothing. And it was devastating. I have older kids who were completely affected by this as well. We had a great relationship. This was their cousins. During this time, my brother had a baby, so he's almost 2 now. My kids have never met him. And I was able to meet him under unfortunate circumstances, not by my choosing. In January, the unimaginable happened. My dad ended up passing away, and I was able to go back for the funeral, but none of my kids or my husband were able to be there. And now I'm here alone, grieving. I cannot be with my family. My mom can't come here to to spend time with me now that she's alone. So it's affected every part of my life. And my parents and my siblings, they missed my twins' graduation from high school, all their all their sporting events. My one son played basketball, and they did a special basketball night where they had to dedicate their game to someone who's made a huge impact in their life. And he chose my dad, and he played for Papa. And this was before he passed. So he would have been there. My dad would have been there to be at that game, and he couldn't. And my boy actually recorded himself and played a video that they were able to show at the funeral. I mean, we were a close family, and we still are, but, and I have one daughter, and all her girl cousins, they were so tight. They had such a great bond, and it's fractured. I mean, how can you continue that when you can't be with each other? And living so close to the border, no one really knows what's happening. They've said it before too. They don't know that we can't just travel freely. No one really knows that there's still restrictions. Like, they think, oh, the US. That's not the case, because there are restrictions, and most people are unaware of that. So I'm just here today to share my story and to let people know that this does affect families. And I live in kind of a family saturated community where everyone goes to the cottage, everyone hangs out, every holiday is with family. And I don't have that. And I long for that to happen again. And I just don't see that happening in the near future, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think based on, some of the talk in the US versus Canada, I think that I believe it was Tanya that was saying she's hopeful, or maybe it was Marcella, but it seems like this might be something that the US will sort of be the first to amend or to lift. But it just seems like the federal government in Canada seems to have doubled down on these mandates, on these travel mandates at the border and for air travel, and have doubled down. It's been included in the budget that was revealed last month with regard to funds being directed to continue to facilitate these travel restrictions for Canadians. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to listen to these stories and to know, I know there are children who haven't been able to see parents. There are loved ones who have, as we've even just talked about here, who've missed being able to see their parents, before they passed. And it seems very heartless, and again, my heart just breaks listening to your story.
Well, it's cruel. It's unimaginable. Never in my lifetime did I ever think the border would ever be closed, especially for this long. I considered Canada and the US so similar that they were almost one country. But that obviously is not the case anymore. I don't even recognize Canada. I think
it's the sentiment of a lot of Canadians. I think it's been, friendly Canada, right? It's been
right.
The easygoing Canadians, friendly, free, and I think that the sentiment has definitely changed for many Canadians.
Well, and it's interesting because I'm Canadian, and I was going into my own country. I was treated like a criminal. So I don't understand what's going on. wish that they would lift all the restrictions and allow us to travel freely. That's really why I'm here today. I want to advocate for that, for families to be reunited and for kids to see their cousins and their grandparents. For so much time has been lost, and that time is not going to be able to be, we can never get that back. Mm-hmm. So, and moving forward, now with my dad gone, I need to be with my family. I need to be together with them. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, the idea that being with family is not essential. I can't imagine who could honestly say that in their heart, that wouldn't be essential. Alicia, same question to you. You know, again, if it's going to be a vaccine that's going to allow you to reunite with your family, why the choice?
Yeah, I just don't think COVID discriminates between the vaccinated and unvaccinated. So it's just a personal choice for me. And I don't want this to be about that, because it's not about that in my circles. And to me, it's more about just the freedom to travel. So I hate the division it's caused. I hate the divide. I don't even want to talk about the vaccine, because to me, it's a non-issue. It's, what are we doing here? Obviously, the vaccine doesn't stop COVID. So just open the borders and stop this crazy punishment for us that we just want to be with our families. I mean,
yeah, and that's a good word for it. I think a lot of people feel that way. They feel like this is a punishment. They're being punished for some reason. And agreed. Again, heartbreaking. And Alicia, I look forward to the time where either side, you know, at some point, something needs to change so that families can see each other again, for sure.
Right. And hopefully this will just bring awareness to the restrictions that are still in place, because living in the United States, you'd never know there was restrictions.
And is that what you're seeing where you are right now, Alicia? Just back to normal?
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But
the logic behind it is lost, and you know, I think the problem too is the science has changed, and that seems very obvious to many, but the policies have not.
Exactly. So,
thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you for having.
Yeah. And Justin, I'm going to jump back to you just for a moment, because we didn't get a chance to finish our conversation. Last question to you then. Same question. If it is this vaccine, if it's this idea that is what's preventing you from being able to see family, what are your thoughts on that as we share these stories to people who are not vaccinated, but who have chosen to be?
Yeah, and it is a choice for me, but I won't say that it's, you know, just a personal choice. It's, you know, I do a bunch of research on this, not as some people call Facebook research or whatever you want to call it, right? You know, I know people will do that. And then I have my mom on the side, who she was in the medical field for 40 years. She retired, right? She was in Alberta Health. She has a lot of friends and knows how to do a ton of research on this with friends of hers that are doctors, nurses, you name it. And there is just too much evidence on this to just ignore the fact that people are getting blood clots, that they're having, you know, their their heart rates are going through the roof, that strokes. She had a friend who is now basically almost an invalid on a couch after the first shot, right? And her company made her do it. It was mandated that she had to go get it or lose her job. Between that and the fact, like I said earlier, that it doesn't seem to matter, right? Whether you have it or not. I don't even know how they call it a vaccine, really, when it doesn't stop anything, right? If everybody's still getting affected, and it's just going to mitigate some of the symptoms of it, and just maybe you're not quite as sick. Well, to me, that's no different than taking an Advil when you have a headache. It's, you know, it just mitigates it, but it doesn't stop it. So I can go sit in a stadium with, you know, 30,000 people side by side, don't have to worry about that at all, you know, to watch a hockey game or something. But you put me on a flight with, you know, a couple hundred people. Oh no, yeah, you got to be vaccinated, right? We can't let you do that, right? Can't let you sit by somebody. It's there is no logic to it, right? And you said it, right? The logic is lost, and a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people that just have listen to what the government says. The government says take it, okay, I'll do it, right? And they're saying, oh yeah, we'll give you this if you take it. Well, it wasn't yours to take away from me in the first place, so I shouldn't have to fight to get it back, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's
right?
a good one. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So no, I won't take it. I even talked to my mom. Like I said, my stepdad did pass from COVID. He had underlying health conditions, as I said, and she's like, don't even think about doing it, just to come and see me, right? And I won't.
Well, Justin, again, I am, thankful that you have shared your story, and sad that this has been your experience as well. And, you know, I just want to say thank you to all of you for getting on, sharing your story. I know it's nobody's business whether somebody has chosen to be vaccinated or not, but these are the times we're living in. We're living in a time right now where we've got mandates and restrictions that are preventing, again, likely close to 6 million, if not more, Canadians from crossing the border, and then again affecting millions of U.S. citizens from coming to Canada to see their loved ones and their family members as well. And so the point of having these conversations and discussing this with these families is again to raise awareness. I know if you are not affected, if you have chosen to be vaccinated, you have been able to travel, this has not been an issue for you. There are a lot of people who are still struggling, and it's heartbreaking stories to hear. And again, some people may have a stance that, well, if this is the goal, is to travel, then you should choose to get vaccinated to do so. And I think the scary thought is that would have to be a choice that would need to be made in order to do something that fundamentally was and should be a freedom in this country. So thanks to everybody for joining us and hearing from these families. And here's hoping that we see change on either side of the border soon. Thanks for joining us.